We are going to get started, so I'm going to cut Bill off. So, my name is Miranda Wagner. I am a district technician with the Sherburne Soil and Water Conservation District. Thank you for coming today. This is actually our third annual Lunch and Learn. We had one right before COVID without knowing what we were doing, and then we're able to do it again this year. So we have three speakers today. We have Peter with the Nature Conservancy. We have Asu from the U of M who's going to be zooming in today, and then we also have Mark who's from the Soil Health Coalition talk today. We will take a break between each speaker in case you want to grab either something to drink or more food. There's plenty back there. But also during the downtime, this is kind of Bill's last work event. So Bill, how long have you been with the district?
42 years.
42 years. So he is retiring for real this time. So this is kind of his last event. So please wish him well. And we've got a little cake back there since we can't do anything for him again, he said. So I'm going to let Peter, we're going to start a little bit early because I think most of the people that are CP are here. So I'm going to have Peter, you can come up and you can get started. We are going to record the presentation in case you wanted a copy of it or in case there's someone that wasn't able to join. We can send it out to them. But Peter, I will let you kind of give your intro. Does anyone need a handout of Peter's before we get started? Anyone else?
Yeah, wait till after the chicken and then.
Oh.
All right.
1 second.
Actually, just advance for me.
Yeah.
Kelly and Visu, you guys can see this, right?
It's still hasn't started sharing, but we can see a black screen saying Francine Larsens has started screen sharing. But there is no, it's a black screen right now. Yeah, now we can see the slide. Mm-hmm.
All right, well, hello, everybody. I'm Peter Mead, an ag project manager with the Nature Conservancy. This is a nice format. This is way better than being the guy before lunch or something. So thanks for coming today, I guess. I'm here to talk about the Ecosystem Services Market Consortium, which is a mouthful. I'll try to refer to it as ESMC from here on out, so I don't have to say all those syllables. And the pilot project that's here in Minnesota and opportunities to get involved, I guess, in the programs. As a Nature Conservancy, we've got basically three priorities in the work that we do across the globe. We've got operations actually in 79 countries throughout the world. I work for the chapter here. It's Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota chapter. We've got basically three priorities, which are tackling climate change, protecting land and water, and providing food and water sustainably. That's kind of what we're all about, which makes our work in agriculture kind of fit and mesh with all three of these priorities and match very well with the Nature Conservancy's overall mission, which is to conserve the lands and waters on which all life depends. Go to the next slide. So ESMC, the Ecosystem Services Market Consortium's mission, they're very mission-driven, impact-driven, nonprofit, and also very science-driven. So ecosystem services, I should just back up a little bit. Ecosystem services themselves are services that are provided by natural processes. It may be for the sake of water quality, it may be for the sake of biological integrity. It may be greenhouse gas reduction in combating climate change. And we're talking about soil, we're talking about wetlands, we're talking about just plants, we're all actually talking about animals. Overall, they provide ecosystem services that we as humans benefit from. So ESMC is a nonprofit that works to compensate farmers and ranchers that improve the environment through best management practices in their operations. And basically their program seeks to reduce greenhouse gases, improve water quality, and increase other ecosystem services that benefit all of society. You can go to the next slide here. So you hear a lot of buzz about carbon in ag right now. There's a variety, there's quite a few different programs that are rewarding or incentivizing farmers to do practices that sequester more carbon in the soil. And then there's emerging carbon markets. So some companies are able to buy carbon credits to offset their operations, or some supply chains are making shifts in different places within their supply chain to make sure that they offset the amount of carbon that they may have to do either from a regulatory standpoint or just from a voluntary kind of feel-good commitment to combating climate change. ESMC itself has a variety of pilot project locations across the nation. There's 9 active pilots, one of which is here in Minnesota. And then there's a few more that are emerging. And basically there's different protocols that have been developed or are in development through these pilot projects across the nation to determine the amount of ecosystem benefit that's provided by various practices on farms in those given regions of the country. You can go to the next slide. All right, so our pilot project here in Minnesota is part of a partnership between the Nature Conservancy, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, part of the USDA, and the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. Overall, the project, it was entitled, or created to increase the understanding, interest, and confidence in newly created scalable ecosystem service markets. Carbon is one of them, water quality trading is another one, water quantity trading is another one. And then there's also a concept that's in development over biodiversity crediting as well. So this is, a partnership, and we really started our effort here in Stearns County, focusing primarily on the Sauk River watershed. And we've got a goal of 50,000 acres in Minnesota, so we've expanded that scope significantly, basically to any of the state that's draining to the Mississippi River, ultimately as it leaves Minnesota. Go ahead here. And partners, I won't go through them all, but there's quite a few people on board that have made this happen so far. See a few familiar names there, and some other players in the carbon market game that are actually supportive of this project as well. We can go ahead. But why ESMC? When it comes to carbon programs, like I said, there's a whole host of them out there. Some folks have heard of, like they say, Indigo Ag, there's True Terra, there's True Carbon. Under True Terra, there's at least 10, 12 different players that are filling mailboxes, making phone calls, conducting marketing actively throughout like Minnesota and Iowa, that offer some degree of compensation or possible compensation, namely for carbon when it comes to farming and sequestering carbon or other nutrients through best management practices. But why ESMC? Why would you be interested in EMC? What is the benefit and why is TNC behind the ESMC? There's multiple credits created. One is not carbon. There's opportunities again for carbon crediting, yes, but also water quality crediting, water quantity crediting, and again, the evolving biodiversity credit marketplace. It's nonprofit. ESMC is in this to make money. It's business driven and it's ag industry led, but again, it remains nonprofit. So the idea is an environmental outcome and compensation to farmers, not profit for a corporation. It incorporates opportunities for both voluntary and regulatory crediting. So say an industry may be required to meet a certain level of carbon emissions or required to reduce nitrogen runoff within their operation. They're able to get regulatory crediting through ESMC. There's also voluntary, again, when there's corporate commitments, say Target commits to 30 by 30 goal for reducing carbon within their supply chain. They're able to incentivize or purchase these credits to get these best management practices on the land in order to meet their goals. It's open protocols, so there's no black box. You actually know the science behind the calculations that are made. There's technology and actual soil testing. So this isn't just measured by satellites. A baseline is established for every field that's enrolled using very rigorous soil testing to determine exactly what level of carbon is there when we start, as well as nutrient levels and overall biology of the soil. It's focused on both row crop and grassland, as well as edge of field practices. So land being converted to say perpetual easements or restorations is also eligible to be enrolled in the program. And the idea with these pilots is that we can test and then launch. So the marketplace isn't set to launch until next year in 2022 for ESMC. The idea is that we can work within each one of those regions I referenced earlier to develop a program that works for not only local water quality or climate goals, but also for every farmer that participates. Go ahead to the next slide. So this is kind of how it works with the multiple crediting. So, you may be increasing soil carbon or reducing the greenhouse gas emissions on the farm. You may be improving water quality, either groundwater quality or say surface water quality, reduce water use, perhaps. And then, as we said, piloting the biodiversity component. So maybe, increase diversity within crop rotations, maybe a little bit more presence of native vegetation and field edges, those sorts of things would also be eligible for crediting once the marketplace is fully created in 2022. So effectively, you can stack all of those. You can generate all those credits with one practice versus just focusing on carbon and generating the credit there. And then the producer, is able to monetize on their impacts on an annual basis. Go ahead. So I talk best management practices. This is just kind of the suite of things that are eligible to be enrolled in ESMC within our region here. The chief ones and kind of the, I guess our biggest bang for the buck and where we're seeing the most opportunity are in residue and tillage management, as well as reduced tillage. So, maybe minimizing tillage, eliminating fall tillage, or going strictly no-till. Cover crops, obviously, a really big one for us and for generating both carbon credits, but also water quality credits. Nutrient management in various shapes and forms, and prescribed grazing is another opportunity to generate both greenhouse gas and water quality credits. Field buffers, contour buffers, ponds and wetlands, grass waterways. Another biggie, conservation crop rotation, just simply increasing the diversity within a rotation, say adding a third or a fourth species. Does have some benefit and is eligible for crediting through the program. Irrigation water management, which up around Sherburne County, definitely a hot ticket, I guess. So that is something that's eligible to generate not only greenhouse gas, but water quality and water quantity credits within the SMC. And then various drainage water management practices. Okay. So pilots overall, participants kind of have this unique opportunity right now to enroll for a short term. Typically commitments in ESMC going forward will be a 5-year or 10-year commitment. And with most other programs, you see around a 10-year commitment to participate. Right now, only basically requiring a 1 to 2 year commitment through the 2022 and 2023 crop years. And then there's a lot more flexibility, thus less risk that's being allowed for producers to just kind of test the waters. And we don't have to go full farm. You can do a single field. There's no real acreage restriction, but the amount of work that goes into the soil sampling and analysis to establish that baseline is a little bit cost prohibitive if we start getting under, say, 40 acres. You can go to the next slide. As for participating in the pilot, like I say, there's no minimum or maximum acreage limits. You can phase in more acres, so you're not locked into those initial acres. You can phase in more over time as you may gradually make changes on the farm. And you're not required to relinquish data ownership, which is kind of huge. There are a lot of different markets like this that are emerging that participation in the program basically means you're committing all your farm data to them for their purposes moving forward. So it does remain with you. It's very private for producers, which has been always a talking point, I guess, when we've worked with folks so far. Again, annual contracts during the 2021, which we're just ending now, and that 2022 pilot years. And then there's an option to just roll into a 5-year contract when the market launches at the end of next year. When it comes to eligibility, just pretty key questions here that kind of get the wheels moving. You got to be interested in adopting soil health or conservation practice changes that are on that list of eligible practices. If you're interested in implementing improvements that exceed minimum standards set by law. So basically, if you're, if you were implementing a buffer strip that was required by the Minnesota buffer law, that would not necessarily be eligible. Should you choose to enhance the required width of that area would be eligible. but things that are required under regulation cannot be enrolled in ESMC themselves. You have to be managing land that has not been deforested in the past 10 years, where it's not being converted from, say, native prairie. And then you have to have fields that are located within the pilot region, which I'll show you a map out here shortly. And there has to be proof of ownership or lease agreement, some evidence of control of land for the period of your contract. Finally, you can't enroll ESMC's fields in another carbon market program. You can be involved in other ones on a farm, but that particular field cannot be enrolled in another marketplace program. This is just kind of how the stages work. So initially, if somebody's interested, they're going to commit to making practice changes and move into implementation. And then they'll get enrolled. And ideally, these people are working with enrollment specialists. We have a few trained around the state already. And come December here, we'll have another handful of folks working in Minnesota Department of Agriculture that work on the Minnesota Ag Water Quality Certification Program that will also be in a position to assist producers with becoming enrolled. Once they've enrolled, the fields that they've chosen are sent out for a kind of rigorous process of soil stratification to determine what points within a field are most crucial to collect samples. And they take a rather large core, say a 2-inch by 30-centimeter core for sampling of 7 different parameters, and that establishes a baseline. From there, the practice changes from literature values that have been calibrated to the regions of the program will generate an estimate of the credits and assets that are quantified each year. Year 5 of a contract, soil sampling would happen again. That baseline and the estimates between those years would all be rectified, and any adjustments would be made. If a producer actually generated more than was estimated, they would be compensated for that. If it was less than that, there would be no loss of credits. It would just kind of reestablish the baseline moving forward. So that's kind of the credit and asset verification process. Once those credits exist, they'll move into the marketplace. They're available for sale. Those credits or assets are sold, and the producer gets the payment directly from ESMC. Go to the next slide. This is kind of the timeline of how it works. All the way on the left there, look at the previous year harvest. So say your corn just came off. You're at year 0. That's your starting point right there. When that last year's crop comes off, the credit period begins. You identify those fields, and you make your practice changes. You got harvest year 1, and that's basically when the credited period ends. All data for your operation, your agronomic data, yield data, et cetera, for that crop year gets entered. Everything related to that best management practice gets entered. Those assets are created, verified, and again, go on the marketplace, and the payment comes to the producer as year 2 begins. Go to the next slide. So this is what we're working with here in Minnesota. We've got a 50,000 acre goal. That's the funding that we received from USDA to make this project happen, to pay for all the soil analysis and everything that has to happen, and to meet our general interim goals for both carbon sequestration and water quality improvements. We're looking, as I said, we started in the Sauk, and we've expanded this to basically the Mississippi River drainage within the state of Minnesota. Why? I guess there's a lot of available cost share through a variety of grants, through a variety of programs, through a variety of one watershed, one plans that have identified these sorts of activities and prioritized where they need to happen. There's a huge livestock component in much of this area, and there are downstream water quality buyers as those water quality credits are generated from a regulatory standpoint. Crops, we're primarily targeting this huge, corn silage and soy rotation, the opportunities that exist because of that, working with dairy and then working with poultry as well. And then comes the question on everybody's mind every time I talk about this program. You can go to the next one right away, I guess. What does it pay? And that's been tough because, as I said, these are, this is a pilot. This is an emerging market. An emerging marketplace, and there's a lot of other players out there, yes, but they're all kind of guessing and shifting as they go too. We do see values, and I guess credits that have been bought and sold through various marketplaces so far. Can range from say $5 to $20 a ton. Some more, some less, but that's the general range that we've seen so far. And an average of say 0.3 to 0.5 tons of carbon sequestration annually across, it's the cultivated cropland across the US. So that's a very wide estimate, but so that's about what you could expect. So around the neighborhood of 3/4 to 1 ton per acre is what we're seeing. What does it pay? Right now, I can't tell you what the ESMC marketplace is going to tell you, or is what it's going to pay as it launches in the end of 2022. Fortunately, and you're the first crowd to get to hear this, we're in a new position here through some corporate sponsorship, through folks that have solid climate commitments, where we've got a limited amount of funding right now to pay the range of $15 to $20 an acre for 2 years to enroll in the ESMC pilot. How it's looking right now is half of that payment would go to you upfront when you sign up for the program. When you implement your first practice, you get the second half of that payment, and then when you complete that second year of the contract, you would get that additional $15 or $20 per acre for that year as well. So ideally, you're looking at $30 to $40 an acre to get enrolled in that 2022-2023 crop season. You'd be able to enroll in any other cost share program, say EQIP from USDA, state cost share, clean water legacy funding. However, you may be able to fund that practice change, whether it's making a shift to no-till or reducing your tillage, or incorporating another crop within your rotation. You can stack all those things and still be eligible to generate these multiple credits through ESMC at this time and get that $15 to $20 an acre per year for the 2 years to get started in the pilot. That's not going to go super far into our 50,000 acre goal. So I would encourage any folks to let anybody know or think themselves about testing the waters here, because it's a very short-term commitment. It's an opportunity to inform how ESMC works, not only for us in Minnesota, but across our basic ag eco region. And make sure it's something that's realistic for the people that are making the changes and that we're asking these things out on the landscape. You go ahead here too. There are some resources. As I mentioned, our pilot really started working with Stearns SWCD, and there is a website we've got in partnership with them, which is Acres for Water. Just go to acresforwater.com/ESMC. There's relevant fact sheets. There's a lot more information on the pilot. You can get connected with an enrollment specialist there on the website. There's also a lot more information on how the overall ESMC program is evolving, the protocols, the science, the standard operating procedures for the soil sampling and the soil analysis. It's all very transparent and available at ecosystemservicesmarket.org. And then really the ultimate step in getting started, even if you haven't talked to or worked with an enrollment specialist, but if you're an interested landowner and interested producer, is going to the ESMC producer portal, which is esmcportal.org, and creating an account. At that point, myself, as my role, I guess, kind of as the intermediary between producers and ESMC, would review that and approve that account, and then be able to get more information from you and look at eligibility and either connect you with an enrollment specialist or help you get started myself. So, I think tail end of it. The other person to talk to, if you're really curious about the nuts and bolts of ESMC, we're daily with program manager Stacy Cushenberry over in Illinois, who works for ESMC and has helped us develop all the trainings we've conducted and the trainings that are yet in development, as well as honing those protocols and handling the soil sampling coordination between ESMC and the labs that are being used here in Minnesota. So with that, I guess, do you want to hold any questions to the end, or?
No, if anyone has any questions for Peter, go ahead and ask them now. Or if you don't want to ask them in front of the group, I'm going to release you to get more food and beverage, and then you can come up and ask me your questions. But does anyone have anything for him?
Sure.
So my question is, so when you get at the end of the year, when you have all of this carbon credit, now is that carbon credit then, you know, can you go out on the market and actually sell those credits? Is that actually recognized by, say, some carbon market bank somewhere? Out
Yes,
there?
yes. So when it comes to carbon with ESMC, I guess they're basically certified by say the gold standard, which a lot of folks can't say. They've gone through the most rigorous reviews in the carbon marketplace, which is why everybody was a partner initially. And then a lot of them kind of peeled off and developed their own markets because it quite frankly takes a lot of time to get this right. So it's the most science-backed player in the game, I guess. They do actually mean something. And that's been really the holdup in development and implementation of the marketplace is making sure that those are defensible from every regulatory standpoint, as well as those, you know, so those voluntary needs that people are making, you know, the corporate commitments to, say that, you know, Best Buys and Targets and Walmarts and everybody in the world. So it would fully satisfy both marketplaces as it launches in 2022. There's nowhere you can click and magically buy those credits right now. We had the big news, say, last year of the True Carbon thing, and they bought up 50,000 acres worth of credits. And well, that was one deal to Microsoft to fulfill a corporate commitment to sustainability. And there have been increased opportunities through that program since then, but that's kind of, you know, it's a lot of people call it the Wild West when it comes to carbon trading right now. And we like to think of ESMC as sort of the new frontier rather than the Wild West. Hope that answers your question.
So I know you mentioned the credit for carbon. What about kind of monetary credits for water quality?
Sure. Right now, so there are, you know, a variety of ways in which to generate those credits. Right now, ESMC, I guess their vendor and their modeler, essentially, which is a firm called Tetra Tech, are in conversations with MPCA because at this time, MPCA does everything a little bit differently every time they do water quality credit. They've got protocols or guidance when it comes to crediting for water quality, but really trying to pin down something that's going to work to basically, you know, fulfill anything they would require of, say, you know, any point source, and also, you know, work with ESMC. So. It's there. There's some efforts and the conversations are mostly happening over the North Fork of the Crow right now. So we'll see where that goes in the next couple of months. I'd expect to have a very firm answer to exactly that question. Be able to say, well, it works like this, but not quite yet. Yeah.
If we sell a carbon credit for ton, say $5, someone buying that, how are they making, you know, if I'm selling it for $5, well, they're gonna make $50. Like, how are they? We're getting a fair shake of making those changes for $5. They're gonna make, they're gonna write that off with taxes for 100. You know, like, how do you make sure that they're compensated for what we're selling?
That's, you know, that's an interesting question, and that's part of the market evolving. And I wish you weren't recording so I could be more frank.
You can.
No,
You can.
well, no, that's just fine. You know, I had a conversation with, you know, let's say a person who's retired from being in a very high position in a rather large agricultural corporation, and I asked him what the magic price was. Like, what would it actually have to cost? You know, so that farmers are getting their fair shake when it comes to either, you know, the regulatory penalties that somebody that's buying those credits or needing those credits may face, or from, you know, say how they benefit when they meet those goals. And he said $75 an acre. You know, we're not going to be there anytime soon. That could come. That could definitely come. But I wouldn't want to discourage anybody from making those changes now and taking what they can. And again, the huge benefit here is that ability to stack, you know, to work with various programs to, you know, identify those opportunities, get maybe the most dollar per acre you can to make those shifts, and then generate these benefits and you know, kind of work that all back in. Ideally, somebody would, you know, start slow, kind of test the water, start with a 40, you start with an 80, right? They'd be signed up for cover crops through EQIP, and they get a little icing on the cake from some local cost share that's also incentivizing doing that. And they get started, right? And they get into ESMC. And then when their EQIP contract is up, they roll into CSP, and they still be in ESMC, and they keep stacking those benefits, and they keep generating more and more of those credits as time goes on. So that's why I wouldn't, you know, not get involved, especially at this point, because you could be in a very good point as these markets emerge, I think. So. Mark.
Sorry, maybe I missed this, but
does it fall into for folks who are already doing some soil practices and they're still eligible?
Sure. Now, this is the big challenge, and this all goes back to basically the certification of those carbon credits. So it has to be an additional practice. You have to be making a change on the farm, and that kind of stinks, honestly, to some degree, because you've got the early adopters out there, the folks that are doing the right thing, or that have made changes that works for them, and they've kind of tested all the waters, and they're it's really working now. They can't get it, right? Maybe they could make another change on top of things and create an opportunity. Yes, they could. But basically, it has to be a new practice change. And the reason for that is it has to be additional carbon or additional water quality changes at that baseline. When that soil sampled, when you start at day 0, it has to be additional in order to be defensible to the certification or the certifying bodies that exist in the world. And this is a worldwide program. This isn't just for us here in the Midwest or in program. So, you talk about the Paris Climate Accord, different goals that have been set because of that. I mean, this is all to cut that mustard. So it has to be new.
I think that's fantastic to hear. I a lot of people that work with are in transition and they're moving, they're starting with a small piece of acreage and they're advancing it as they go. So
Yep.
I think that's actually good. I'm glad to hear that. And then just so that kind of reading this form here, at the end of 2022, they still have an option for an annual contract?
Well, they will, because the marketplace will be launched. So then, the pilots will kind of start to move back and hands off, and this will be ESMC's baby. And they'll start contracting and, hunting folks down to get that soil testing taken care of. And, they'll be the ones working more directly, soliciting input from producers and things when they have to do their reporting at the end of the year and things. But we're there to grease the wheels and make things happen and build a model that works here in Minnesota. So. Great, thanks everybody.
Thanks, Peter.
Yeah, and I'll be around, of course, so if you want to pick my brain, feel free.
So I'm going to give you a couple minutes if you need to grab something to drink, or there's more food in the back. So do that if you're too sequestered. I'm going to, David didn't know I was going to do this, but I did want to introduce David because he's basically cross-trained in all of my work now from my maternity leave this past summer. So if you've seen him out and about, David is, that's who it was. So he did most of the ET reporting this year and helping out listeners and things like that. So if you see him about, that's David. Say hi to him. He's nice. And he's mostly, actually, he does forestry work. So if you wanted to look at a tree, you can do that as well. And then just kind of jumping off of what Peter was talking about, we actually have a partnership with the Nature Conservancy right now with a multi-species cover crop program. We currently have 2 farms enrolled in that program. It's kind of, it's an elevated version of what we currently have as a district. So it is a 3-year commitment, but it pays very well. And it's a partnership with TNC and then also financially supported by Cargill. So we do have one more farm that we were hoping to enroll in this year. So let me know if you're interested. But the catch is that it is 3 years on the same piece of land. So you'd have to be creative. So if anyone need anything, we're gonna pass it off to Vasu. No? Okay. So our next speaker will be Vasu Sharma, who I will let her say her title and what her work does. I wanted her to speak today because I went to the research day out at the research farm and I didn't see any of you there. So I told her that I wanted her to come and talk about it. And she is zooming in today, so if you have any questions, please so ask her.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. So should we wait for people to come back, or is it a good time to start?
Just give them 2 minutes, Buster.
Okay. Okay.
Vasu, I think you can get started.
All right, thanks everyone. My name is Vasu Sharma. I'm the irrigation specialist at the University of Minnesota. I think most of you, I can see some familiar faces here on the screen, so many of you know me, but for those who don't know, I work at the U of M in soil, water, and climate department, and most of my research is in the central sands region where irrigation is prominent. And today I'll be talking about some of my research projects on irrigation management that are mostly focused in Becker, in the area where you are, in the Sherburne County area, but also in other central Minnesota region, which is also applicable at Becker. So I'll be talking particularly about 4 research projects that are ongoing or the one that we completed this year. So the first one is, which I call Irrigation and Nitrogen Interaction Study. It's basically what we are focusing on is developing some concurrent irrigation and nitrogen management strategies for corn in Minnesota in the central sands region. The second is the comparison of irrigation scheduling methods. So this study we started in 2019, and this was 2021 was the last year. So I'll be sharing one slide of research results that what we found. We don't have all the results yet about nitrogen uptake. They are still in the lab, the samples are in the lab, but the yield results that we have, I'll share those with you. Then the new project that we are starting this year that we received funding from LCCMR is expanding the online irrigation management assistant tool, which is a irrigation scheduling tool to all the irrigated counties in Minnesota. Right now it's available for 5 counties, and I'll talk about it. And then the last project that we started in Belgrade area in Bonanza Valley this year was about the variable rate or precision irrigation management. And Taylor, I can see her, she's sitting there, she's the co-PI on this project. So we both are working on this in this study on a grower's field. All right, so first study, which is irrigation and nitrogen interaction study, the main goal of this research was to understand the interaction effect of irrigation and nitrogen on different crop parameters, including crop yield and nitrate leaching. So you know that nitrogen and water, they are codependent. So codependent management factors, which it's very important to evaluate them dependently, not independently. So right now we don't have any research that focuses on the codependence of nitrogen and irrigation on each other. So we know that under reduced irrigation rates, the nitrogen fertilizer has to be reduced. So how much that reduction would be, and is it optimum or economically optimum, that's need to be understood. So we started this research where we are looking at 4 irrigation treatments, including full irrigation, which is whenever the soil moisture is close to the management allowable depletion, we refill the soil profile back to field capacity. So that's our 100% irrigation. So whatever the crop is using, we are replacing it back with irrigation fully. The 75% full irrigation is the 75% of full irrigation. So for example, if our 100% irrigation is 1 inch, our 75% irrigation is 0.75 inches, and same the 50%, which is the reduction to 50% of the full irrigation amount. So the timing of all these irrigation treatments is same. It's just the amount of water that we are putting in is lower in the limited irrigation treatments, which is 75% and 50%. And then we are also comparing all of them with rain-fed, which is no irrigation at all in any of the plot in the rain-fed plots. And then we are also doing the 6 nitrogen rates. So starting from 0 pounds nitrogen per acre to 350 pounds nitrogen per acre in 70 pounds per acre increments. So we chose to have 280 and 350, the higher N rates, because we wanted to see that crop response curve and that diminishing curve, like what happens at the higher nitrogen rates to complete that production function. So in total, we have 24 treatments, which is combination of 4 irrigation, 6 nitrogen rates, and we replicated this 4 times. So this is the Becker Research Farm, the picture that you see. The red boxes are the replications, and within each red box, we have these white boxes, which is our subplot with the main irrigation treatment. And within each irrigation treatment, we have 6 nitrogen rates. So on this site at Sandplain Research Farm, if you have been there, we have new 8 irrigation systems, and out of those 8, I think 4 of them have a VRI capability. So this one is the linear move irrigation system with VRI capability. So we can change the irrigation rates within these small white boxes. All right, so very exciting results. I put this yield data. The left side graph is 2020 yield data, and the right is 2021. So if you look at the let me start the laser pointer. So look at the 2020 yield data. The 4 lines here indicates you the 4 irrigation levels. The yellow one is the rain fed, the blue is 100%, the orange is 75%, and then the gray is 50%. In 2020, what we found that there is almost no difference between irrigation treatments except the rain fed. So rain fed yield was lower. However, all these 3 irrigation treatments are almost giving us the same response at all nitrogen rates. So in this graph, the x-axis is nitrogen amount and the y-axis is grain yield. And we see as we increase the nitrogen amount, the grain yield increases. And then at the higher nitrogen rate, there is a slight drop. So we found that diminishing curve as well. So there's this optimum economic nitrogen rate, which is around between 210 to 280 for all of these irrigation treatments. But the main finding is that we couldn't see any significant differences in yield at any nitrogen rate in 2020. The reason behind that is that we got sufficient rain in 2020. So there wasn't any period in the growing season when the crop was stressed, even when we applied 50% irrigation. However, in 2021, as you know, was a drought year, very dry year, we saw significant difference in crop yield, in crop response curves between irrigation treatments. And you see the yellow line here at the bottom is the rain fed. We found 0 yield, almost 0 to 10 bushels per acre yield in those plots, which is huge. So this shows the importance of irrigation in years like 2021 in this area, that you cannot produce at all if you don't put any water on the crop. Talking about the irrigation treatments, as I said, we found significant differences in grain yield. So 100% irrigation, of course, had the highest grain yield at all nitrogen rates, and then the 75%, and then 50%. And then in both years, I also looked at what is the economic optimum nitrogen rate. So for 100% irrigation in both years, we found almost the same, which is 241 in 2020 and 239 pounds of nitrogen per acre in 2021, and also approximately the same yield at 100% irrigation in both years, because this was the plot that was getting 100% water that your crop requires. So that's your maximum yield that you can produce in this area with optimum amount of water and nitrogen in place. However, this year, when we reduced the irrigation to 75%, the yield at UNR was really reduced. It's like 39 bushels per acre, less than 100%. In the previous year, we did not see that difference. At 75%, the UNR yield was actually 1 bushel higher than 100%. So the take-home message from these results is that the climate or the weather that we get each year actually is the predominant factor that derives yield. So in last year, because we had good rain, average rain or above average rainfall, and we 100% irrigation plots got almost 7 inches of irrigation on top of rainfall. We did not see any significant difference in grain yields between irrigation treatments. So even if you reduce the irrigation rates to 50%, the grain yield reduction is not that big. But in drought years, which are dry years, if you reduce the irrigation rate, that has a big toll on grain yield, so the profit. So this is just telling us the half part of the story, which is just the grain yield. We haven't looked at the nitrate leaching results. So in this study, as I showed you the picture in the last slide, we have lysimeters, 2 lysimeters in each of these plots. So we are also monitoring how much under each irrigation and nitrogen treatment, how much water is going below the root zone, so at 4 feet. So we are collecting that water sample each week and testing it for nitrate, nitrogen. So we have all that data that we have to look at, that how much nitrate is being leached under each irrigation treatment. And then we will do our economic analysis about how much we lost and how much there's loss in yield and how much there is loss in nitrogen. And then we can come up on a conclusion that which system is the best in terms of both environment and economics. All right, so this was the first project. The second project I'm going to talk to you about is a comparison of irrigation scheduling methods. This project we started in 2019, and this was 2021 was the last year. So initially we planned to do it for 2 years, but just give me. I'm sorry, my printer is working, so you might get that sound too. So this year was the 3rd year. So initially the plan was to do it for 2 years, 2019 and 2020. But as you know, 2019 was really wet year. So I thought it's good to have a 3rd year of data to actually get to some conclusion. And I'm glad we did that, because this was very dry year and we got some interesting results. So the 4 methods that we compared were ET-based checkbook method, which is, I think almost all of you know, this is spreadsheet-based method that estimates soil moisture and then recommends you irrigation. And then there is Irrigation Management Assistant Tool, which is an online ET-based method that's developed for 5 county areas. And I'm going to talk about that research as well. It's an online tool. Basically, it's an online version of checkbook method, but with some changes in the calculation process. And then 3rd method is soil moisture monitoring. So we installed some soil moisture sensors in the field and then monitored the soil moisture, and based on the direct moisture measurements, we calculated how much irrigation is required for each plot. And then we used a crop growth model, which is the EPIC crop growth model, to give us irrigation recommendations and see how it works for irrigation management. So these are the 4 methods. So some results. So the top 3 graphs are grain yield, and in 2019, 2020, and 2021. And the bottom 3 graphs are corresponding irrigation amounts. So 2019, 2020, and 2021. So irrigation amounts in inches at each irrigation treatment. So SM stands for soil moisture plots, which is soil moisture monitoring. The CB is checkbook method, IMA tool, and the EPIC crop growth model. So what we found is that the IMA tool recommended the least amount of irrigation in all 3 years, whereas the soil moisture, which is the direct measurement, recommended as the most irrigation. So this shows us that, I think, and then what our data shows, that IMA tool was kind of giving us a lower recommendation, so it was under recommending, whereas the SM, which is the in situ soil moisture sensor measurement, was the accurate measurement, and the most close to the soil moisture measurements was the checkbook method. So many studies in the past have shown that the checkbook method over recommends, like give us a recommendation for over irrigation, but this study doesn't show that. It shows that it gives us the optimum recommendation as compared to soil moisture sensors, which is our direct measurement. However, the timing of the checkbook method was little off. So in terms of amount, we put the same amount of water in soil moisture plots and checkbook plots, but the timing was not same. So that's something which is the drawback of checkbook method. Whereas the IMA method, it recommended us very low irrigation throughout. And the reason behind that is that how it calculates the rainfall. So it doesn't use the weather station data that was on site for the rainfall. It uses some interpolation methods, uses different nearby weather stations and calculate an interpolated value for the site where our study was. So that rainfall value was little off, because of which the irrigation recommendation was little off. So we are working on this in our new project to make it more accurate. And then the epic crop growth model also gave us a good recommendation of irrigation, and the yield reduction, or you can say the yield was very comparable to other treatments, which are the soil moisture monitoring and checkbook method. So in the first 2 years, 2019 and 2020, we did not see any significant difference in grain yield, even though the IMA tool recommended like really low irrigation as compared to other methods. So the grain yield was comparable. So there is no significant difference. However, in 2021, the grain yield was really low in IMA method, with only 3 inches less irrigation as compared to soil moisture. So in the first year, the irrigation was around 4 inches lower than soil moisture plots. In this year, it was only 3 inches, but the yield decline was really big, mostly because it was a drier year. So the conclusion is that in average rainfall year, or in the more higher rainfall years, it lower irrigations and the same results are shown in the previous study as well. If you reduce the irrigation amount, that would not impact too much on, or has too much impact on the yield. Whereas in the drier years, even 1 or 2 inches of lower irrigation can have big yield impacts. So that was the main conclusion of this study. I'm not showing you the the nitrate leaching results, but we also, in this study, we also calculated the nitrate leaching in each of these plots, and the maximum leaching throughout was in the checkbook method. And as I said, that's because of the timing of irrigation. So mostly the checkbook irrigation, the timing of irrigation was little off, because of which it coincides with the rainfall time. So the leaching is higher in those plots. And as you see, we found a linear relationship between grain yield and irrigation, but that relationship was way more stronger in 2021, when we had the drier year. As you compare to 2019 and 2020, we did not find any relationship between grain yield and irrigation. There is a slight linear relationship in 2019, but in 2020, it's a straight line. All right, so the third project I'm going to talk to you about, we have the funding from LCCMR. We got that in July this year to expand this irrigation management assistant tool to all the irrigated counties in Minnesota. So right now we are under planning of how we are going to achieve that, and what will be our plan. So I'm going to share that with you, what we are thinking in terms of expanding it. So the major objective, and not for just this study, for all of our projects, is of course to promote the responsible use of Minnesota's limited groundwater resources and help the environment, how to protect the environment. So talking about little background of the IMA tool, most of you might know about it, but for those who do not know, so the original funding was through, again, LCCMR in 2014, where the counties that are listed here, Little Rock Creek area groundwater area, which is Hubbard, Becker, Vadina, Otter Tail, and Todd counties, this tool was developed in 2014 from this LCCMR money. And the crops that were added to this tool were corn, soybean, alfalfa, potatoes, and edible beans. And till now, in those 5 county or 6 county areas, around 100 users use this tool, which is around 6,500 acres per year. And they saw a good benefit of this tool. However, there are some drawbacks. And from 3 years of our study, we also found that there are some things that can be changed, or that can be tweaked in the tool so that we can make it more accurate. And then after we make it more accurate, it's a good tool because it's easy to use and it's affordable, and there's no cost associated with it for growers to use it. So it should be available throughout the irrigated counties. So that's our idea behind this project. So we wrote this proposal last year and we got the funding this year. and our first main goal is to expand it to statewide. So as I said, right now, these are the orange counties where this tool is available right now, and it was developed for these counties at first in 2015. But now our goal is to expand this tool throughout the state. And this is the dashboard that growers look at when they install this tool. So you can select your field. It automatically grabs all the soil data from Circo data set of your field, and it knows what is your available water holding capacity. And based on the crop that you mentioned to the tool, it would know how much water depletion should be there. So it calculates the irrigation recommendation based on the water balance method. The second goal of our research is to improve the data inputs with sensor and state-of-art forecasts. What we, through the 3-year study that I conducted, what we found that to make it more accurate, we should think about some innovative ideas. So just not the weather stations that MDA has, the 12 weather station in the state. We are collaborating with IBM and the weather company and have the GEMS, which is our University of Minnesota platform to make this collaboration and use as much weather data as we can through all these private data sets as well. And also the sensor-based data. So we are going to install some soil moisture sensors in growers' field and gather that data and use the machine learning tools to make this tool more accurate. So we will be installing some soil moisture sensors in growers' field and use all the weather data that we can access, including the MDA's weather station and the private company's weather station, and using the machine learning tools to feed all this data into the tool and then make this model more accurate. So I'm not going into detail of how all that happened, but just to give you an idea that that's our idea of making it a better model. And then last but not least, our fourth and the most important objective is to provide training for sustainable irrigation management. So first, when you have this kind of tool, which is computer-based online, it's very important that we train the growers who are the end users how to use the tool. So we will be conducting some field days and some training sessions throughout this project. So this project is ending in 2024. So we are planning to do some field days and field days for growers and some workshops for growers to train them on the tool, and as well as train the trainers. So we know that growers work with SWCDs one-on-one. So it's our one of our goal is also to train the trainers, both NRCS and SWCD personnel who are working with growers one-on-one on irrigation management, to train them so that they can also help them in using the tool. So in terms of data collection, as I said, we will be installing some soil moisture sensors throughout the irrigated counties, irrigated region of the state, to gather some soil moisture data so that we can use machine learning tools in order to make this tool more accurate. So these, so the black dots are, as you know, are the irrigation permits from DNR, and most of those are concentrated here in the central region. But we are also collaborating with researchers from other ROCs at the U of M. So we'll be installing those sensors in these 4 research stations, as well as some of the growers' field in the irrigated counties. So I will reach out to the SWCDs soon for the potential collaboration, that how we can install these sensors in growers' field in each of these counties. Okay, so the next one, Miranda, am I on time or?
You're running a little long.
Okay, so I'll be quick. So the last project that I'm going to talk about is the variable rate irrigation. So this has been a topic of interest for growers for so long. I know many growers in Sherburne County and in the Sand Plains region have the VRI system, and they I think have a hard time of using it because they don't know how to use it first, and then if it is profitable or not, and then how to manage it. So we are conducting this research at a grower's farm in Belgrade area in Bonanza Valley, where we are looking at soil variability and try to create the management zones based on which we will irrigate. So we are taking soil maps, some elevation map, and then we did the electrical conductivity mapping of that field that you can see on the screen, and then overlay these data sets on each other to create the management zones. So this is the example of a prescription map. So once we create the management zones, we can go into the, so this was a valley irrigation system. We went into the valley irrigation software and created these prescription maps based on our management zones. So we know that this area, which is lower EC values, gets the highest irrigation, 100% irrigation, and then the reduced levels based on the EC mapping. So in this study, we divided this field into 6 pie-shaped plots, and then 3 of them gets the variable rate irrigation, which means irrigation based on the management zones that we created, and then the URI, which is uniform rate irrigation. So these pies will get, no matter how many zones exist in this pie, we will irrigate it uniformly, and then compare our results, the yield results and nitrate leaching. So we have lysimeters also installed in this field. So we will compare these two on different for different crop parameters. So that would be all. I can take any questions. I know it was quick, but I just wanted to give you an overview of what's going on in the irrigation world. And if you have any suggestions, feedback, or any questions for me, I would be happy to take those.
Thank you, Basu. Do we have any questions that we can think of now? Otherwise, Basu is so good about email and phone calls as well, if you come up with any questions. But we're good? Okay. Thank you, Basu.
Yep, thank you. And I would like to congratulate Bill for his retirement. Congratulations.
Thank you, Bess.
Yeah.
So while we'll have Mark come up, but while we do that, why don't you grab some cake? And then while you're moving around, I'm going to pass out information about the new RCPT funding that Sherburne County irrigators are going to be eligible for. So RCPP is part of EQIP, and this will be eligible in 2022. And I think there are 14 counties, or is there more than that, that came together and submitted an application for additional EQIP funding specifically for EQIP practices. One of the reasons that we did that is because it is very hard to get irrigation practices funded under EQIP, especially standalone practices. So we were able to leverage funds from MDA, U of M, NRCS, the districts, and we were granted the funding. So this will be available to irrigators next year, and with support from the Irrigation Association as well. So I'll pass this around, grab coffee, water, cake, and then we will have Mark come up.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I got the bill data last week. That's not the no, yeah, no, that's the CC zone. She just uses that map to show you pies. Yeah, it's hard to see. I wish the lights were a little darker. But, yeah, no, we got the yield data last week. Yeah, and the lysimeter. I think we also just got nitrogen. But we had an intern that was testing the lysimeter data in season. We found these nitrate tests. He was dipping, kind of like a pH. Yeah. So we're seeing how well that correlates, like that test correlates with the lab. That's another aspect. It would be really cool. Send it to the lab.
I'm gonna let Mark get started and I'll. Yeah.
Well, I use that in my grants.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me, everybody. My name is Mark Gutierrez. I'm with the Minnesota Soil Health Coalition. We're a farmer-led, farmer-run organization managed by 7 board members spread out throughout the state of Minnesota. We operate throughout the state. We're a member-based organization, and we do soil health educational days. We partner with a lot of the soil and water conservation districts, on their field days, and coordinate with some other events. We're part of the I-90 tour. We're just involved in a lot of different soil health events. We partner with the Nature Conservancy, the National Wildlife Federation, lots of other organizations to try to leverage dollars for soil health, and mostly we focus on education. That's what we try to do. Our biggest asset is our mentor network of about 30 farmers who are experienced in soil health practices and make soil health work on their operation. And they volunteer their time as our mentor network. So what that means is if I'm out at a field day like this, or somebody calls me and they have a question, they're doing something with the practice, I will find out more about their practice and I'll find a mentor near them or in their area who's got experience with that practice, put them together so that they can take advantage of some of that experience and maybe avoid some costly mistakes or make that practice more successful for them in the long run. And we also have a partnership with the NRCS, where if you sign up with EQIP and you are looking for a farmer mentor who has done some similar practices to what you're going to do through your EQIP contract, we can pair you up with a mentor through that realm too. So, that's a pretty good opportunity if you're interested in something like that. You don't have to be a member either way. If somebody calls and they're not a member, that's okay. We'll still pair you up with our mentor network, but obviously we're always looking for members. And I passed out a little brochure. It kind of talks about some of the benefits you get. You get to attend a lot of meetings. Like I say, we host a lot of field days and partner a lot of field days. And you get access to the mentor network. We maintain a specialist list. We have like a soils forum, so a bunch of people online where you can just pose a question out there and get a lot of feedback and conversation about that. We send out a newsletter. Membership is $25 a year, so it's pretty affordable. And we use those dollars in ways to try to add value to our members. For example, if you've heard of the Region Ag 101 that the Soil Health Academy puts on, it's a very in-depth virtual soil health course that you have access to for a year, that you can kind of go at your own pace. And well, they usually charge $500 for this. We negotiated a deal with them where we can sell it to our members for $300. So that's a kind of a way we would use some of that money. And I always tell people when I'm at an event, if you sign up with me in person, I carry a few shirts around. If I don't have your size, I'll mail you one, but you get a free shirt today for signing up. So really makes your dollars count, $25 free shirt, free membership. So it's a good deal. But that's just, like I said, one example. We also do a lot of research. So if you have something that you want to try, something innovative, something you've seen done, and we'll try to work with you to write a grant to get that paid for, help with the coordination, get the ag experts to do soil testing. We've got a lot of equipment, things like that. And we can kind of help you, set up the research plot because it's for your benefit. And we'll try to summarize that research. This is our benefit, try to summarize it and share it with as many people as we can when we're out at other field days. So that's kind of another big way I think that we can benefit our members, and everybody can learn from the practices and innovation. So one last kind of pitch on the Region Ag 101. Our deal with them ends on December 1st. So if you're something you're interested in and you want to be a member and you want to take advantage of this for $300, great opportunity to do that. Once that deal's over, it goes back to their normal price of $500, and so see what we can do down the road. But those are kind of things that we try to work on. And does anybody have any questions for me? Great. Okay.
Who are the speakers at the region?
Oh, yep. So that's a great question. The region speakers right now, the way they have this set up, I know Dr. Alan Williams is one of them. Gabe Brown is one of them. God, I'm spacing on his name, but he's definitely one of the 3 in that circle. Does it say their names here somewhere? Alejandro, can't think of his last name right now, but he's one of them. There's 4 or 5 though. All big names in the soil health world that kind of lead those courses. And like I say, they really go into in-depth training through that Regen 101. They talk about the carbon nitrogen ratios and why that's important and all the microbiology you could ever handle, So it's a pretty good course. If you've ever heard of it or haven't taken it, something you're interested in, you can really learn a lot. But we also do little things like we have a sponsorship right now for, I think we have 5 scholarships that we're giving out to people, to our members, for the Soil Management Summit. So if somebody's interested in participating in that and learning more and getting more involved, it's an opportunity. So, we try to come up with, like I say, things like that that add value to our members. And that's really, kind of the highlight of what I wanted to say. So.
And the soil management summit this year is in Mankato, in December. So if you needed the information.
Yep, like I say, if you're a member, or you want to be a member, if you want to attend it, I actually still have 3 of the 5 scholarships available. So that's $155 is what it costs to go to that. So pretty good deal. Again, like I said, for the $25 membership, you get your value in most cases. So thank you for your time. That's really all I have.
Do we have any questions for Mark? All right, thank you, Mark. Okay, that is what we have for you today. If you have any questions for Vasu, for Mark, Peter that you come up with later, just let me know and I can give you their contact information.